Welcome aboard, ye RSS Commentary. I'm the host, Kale, and today's top story, Congress gets RSS Commentary unbanned for false claims of election and COVID misinformation. Big thanks to U.S. House Rep. Jim Jordan. And Jacob Savage exposes DEI Karens in the Lost Generation article and shows how DEI Karens devastated white millennial men with their anti-white racism and insane woke stuff from the WEF and ESG corruption cabal. And in other top stories, FTC has revoked new licenses for new drone parts manufactured outside of the United States. Kale pivots to catch the cash with his aerospace company, A Starship. And the fake news industrial complex, aka FNIC, erupts with fake news BS. In our top story from U.S. House Representative Jim Jordan, Google admits to censorship under Biden, promises to end bans of YouTube accounts of thousands of Americans censored for political speech, including me. This channel has been deleted for 3.5 years. In fact, this thumbnail came from an story you might remember about how AOC is Alex Stein Primetime 99's favorite big booty Latina. This was going on during the COVID insanity. The channel was taken down because I was questioning the efficacy of the vaccine, because just because the disease is very infectious and it infects more people doesn't mean that it has a higher death rate than the flu. COVID actually had a lower death rate than the flu, but it infected more people, and hence more people died. And the vaccine was in fact experimental. It did in fact kill some people, and it did not help my age group lower the risk of death, because I am not obese. I am not out of shape. And I made a COVID ventilator, an open source one. It was the gravity hookah ventilator made from a trash can and an Arduino and a bunch of these cylinders. And it's like uses the water to make it easier to breathe, less hard on the lungs. So I learned a lot from that project. And what I learned from that project was how people died from COVID. The vast majority of people who died had comorbidities. They were obese. They were out of shape. And COVID caused your lungs to get very heavy. And when you have weak lungs, it would make people freak out, and they would have a heart attack and die because they were their lungs were so heavy they were unable to breathe. Okay? And if you had actually tried to save anybody's life before, you would have known this, because this was the number one thing that you had to know in order to save people's lives. And this was why my advice was always that you need to go talk to your doctor, and you need to have your doctor make this decision for you, and not some corporation or some Biden executive Karen Boomer or your university or some Democrat politician. This should be something that you personally are looking into the benefits and the cons using the best information that you have available. And when they censor the information, you do not get the best information. They censored me. You would have gotten the best information from me. Instead, what you got was a load of baloney Fake news! So reading on this article, it says September 23rd, 2025. Yes, it has taken me a while to get the show back online. My scene set obviously is very complicated. I even though I'm an engineer, it took a long time to even figure out what the hell I even did. Today, thanks to the oversight of Chairman Jim Jordan, representative from Ohio, Google commits to offer all creators previously kicked off the platform due to political speech violations on topics such as COVID-19 and elections, an opportunity to return to the platform. Google also admitted the following to the House Judiciary Committee. One, the Biden administration pressured Google to censor Americans and remove the content that did not violate YouTube's policies, including my videos, which did not violate their policies. One such example, when they said I was spreading election misinformation, I said that I watched this documentary, 2,000 Mules, and I saw videos of people stuffing these ballot boxes. They didn't have cameras on all of the ballot boxes because Mark Zuckerberg made this $500 million donation at the last minute to fund mail-in voting in violation of the Help America Vote Act, Section 254, which says that all changes to the federal election system must be published in the clearinghouse 1 month before implementing the changes. This never happened at the last minute. They changed the ballot boxes to privately funded ballot boxes with no cameras on them. And the ones that did have cameras on them, we saw them getting stuffed with large amounts of votes. There are 4 ballot dumps in question. The anomalies in the 2024 or in the 2020 election, where we can see that there is a hockey stick graph and it corresponds to ballot dumps that occurred in large cities. There's 4 of them and they're a hockey stick. Okay. So my claims that YouTube deleted my channel for were actually true. I have evidence. In fact, I made a video analyzing this article. I'm an engineer. I know a lot about statistics. I read through this article on my live stream. I spent hours, maybe 4 hours, dissecting this, looking at their mathematics to make sure that that their statistics were correct. And I'm not the best expert. I'm an engineer with average statistics knowledge. I do program AI and I know more than average about statistics. But my conclusion was I need to look at the data and verify that their numbers are correct. I need to run the algorithm myself on my own computer. I'm also demanding that the U.S. government release the 9/11 collapse simulation of the World Trade Center, because until they release that simulation open source so I can run it on my RTX 3090 system with 96 gigabytes of RAM and 20 cores, it's just CGI. And I say that not because I'm a conspiracy theorist, but because I am a critical thinker and I know enough about these technologies. I've made my own 3D graphics engine. I program in CAD, and I know that it's very easy for me to create something that you have no idea what it is, and I could totally fool you. Right? I'm not an idiot. But you align with the wrong politics, and then YouTube is throwing the hammer down now. So going back to the original article 2, the Biden administration censorship pressure was unacceptable and wrong. And I'm also going to have to add that Xavier Becerra, that his letter to the social media companies. I'm trying to bring it up right now. That when he was the Attorney General for the state of California, the position that Kamala Harris used to hold, he wrote a letter threatening the heads of YouTube and Google that if they did not censor MAGA people warning about election fraud and COVID vaccine injuries, that they would use the full force of the state to come down on them. It was a blatant move by Xavier Becerra. And I'm trying to load up the article and talk to you at the same time. Here it is right here. All right. Here is, just got to wait for the Wayback Machine to load here from the Attorney General of California. It says, Attorney General Becerra urges social media companies to stop the spread of election disinformation on online platforms. I mean, it was blatant. I was warning people about this. I am an engineer. I run a business. I spent years of my time. I spent tens of thousands of dollars of my own money when I'm poor. I'm a startup founder. I have a child to pay for. Nobody's giving me any child support. And I'm putting in the equivalent of millions of dollars worth of my own labor, because with my businesses, I could have generated over $100 million in that time. And then they censored me nonstop, and it caused a lot of problems. And currently, I am suing my engineering school, Portland State University, in a semi-famous court case because they expelled me for criticizing Democrats and cussing in. I said, F all you Democrat mother effers, S my effing D. And F Joe Biden and Hyena Harris. That was F Joe Biden and Hyena Harris, PSU said, was free speech. But F all you Democrat mother effers and S my effing D was not free speech. And then they used preponderance of evidence where they did not present any evidence. And they expelled me using arbitrary state power. ORS 352.087 says all Oregon University policies have force of law. And then they gave me a $20 fine, which they messed up. And that means that the Ninth Circuit cannot dismiss my case, and that I am guaranteed to win, because what happened was at the beginning of our country, the courts instructed juries to weigh the probabilities and rights. And you've seen the Lady Justice with the scales where she's weighing things. That's what that meant. Then a federal judge said that was unconstitutionally vague. So they're going to have to change it. So they changed it to preponderance of evidence. And then they took the rights off the scale. So they were only weighing the rights. And then there was no longer a logical hysteresis mechanism, which is like a thermostat, where the thermostat does not turn on until a little bit over and a little bit under. It does not turn off until it goes a little bit under the set temperature. Because if it did not, the machine would rapidly turn on and off, destroying itself, making preponderance of evidence capricious. It is dependent on the mood of the judge in the random jury selection, whether or not their favorite sports team won the night before, or whether or not I'm a white male or a black male. So we have this pervasive problem where the state is lying nonstop now. And then they've been hiding behind 11th Amendment qualified immunity, where the 11th Amendment says you cannot sue a state that you do not live in. And this has prevented us from being able to get into federal court to protect our rights. It's been making it so that state courts have been ruling on federal law. And then the only way you can get federal courts to rule on it, you have to make it to the Supreme Court, which is like, winning the lottery, which denies our state the right, our due process right to our day in court. The state officials cannot turn down the lawsuit just because they do not want to face their consequences in federal court, citing fictitious 11th Amendment immunity. They must, in fact, use real laws. And herein lies the problem. They have not been using real laws. The Democrats that control the big cities, they have to hold on to power. And most, like 2/3 of Democrats live in big cities. 2/3 of Republicans live in small to medium-sized cities. And so there's like this clash of cultures where the people in the big city, they just think everybody thinks like this because all their friends like that, but it's not like that. They're in an urban monoculture. And they think this kind of stuff is okay. Now, the Republicans, they got their own fair share of problems, but at least they try to uphold the Constitution. It's like nonstop erosion of the Constitution with these leftists, with these proto-fascist or progressive fascists. They will use these threats where they can use the government to come after you because they are, in fact, actually progressive fascists. They do actually want to utilize state-directed capitalism where their people, the angry mob, are able to control the corporations and then force the state, they force the state to do what they want, and then the state, in turn, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, and then the state and the corporations are acting as one fasci, and then the same people who are supporting this are the same people who are calling me a fascist because I know what a woman is. Going back to this article 3, public debate should never come at the expense of relying authorities. I don't really understand relying authorities. So authorities I'm supposed to rely on? It's not well written. 4, the company will never use third-party quote-unquote fact checkers. And 5, Europe's censorship laws that target American companies and threaten American speech, including the removal of, quote, lawful conduct, end quote. And doesn't that tie into that other article? Wait. I don't know. So Business Insider says Mark Zuckerberg showed Google how to make Republicans happy. I didn't really understand exactly what he was saying when I first read this, but reading through, I think he has a valid point. It says big tech platforms used to insist they didn't have an anti-conservative bias. Now that they're saying something a little different, they've never had bias, but the Biden administration tried to bias them. And yeah, they didn't do it. They just banned all our news channels. And first Meta, now Google, they're putting those statements into letters, which are useful for Trump and his Republican allies. I mean, I don't like how he's making it us versus them thing. You could tell he's a Democrat, but I think he's a reasonable one. It does actually make sense that YouTube is following, Google is following suit of Mark Zuckerberg when he just came out MAGA and then he was had the American flag, which I guess that means you're MAGA or something. I don't know. He's probably not MAGA. He probably just realized, you know what, freedom of speech is what got us to where we're at. So we can't shit where we eat. Shoot, I had another article about this. But it's gone. I do so humbly apologize about that. And the Daily Wire says Jim Jordan celebrates YouTube ending conservative censorship, a win for free expression. Congressman Jim Jordan on Tuesday celebrated Google's decision to reinstate YouTube creators like RSS Commentary under President Joe Beijing Biden, calling the decision a win for free expression. Quote, they kicked some people off the YouTube platform altogether. Your channel, all gone. They've agreed to reinstate those individuals, which I think is good. They've said they will not use the fact checkers like other platforms have done, which is a big problem because fact checkers are typically really biased against conservatives. Okay. Are they really biased against conservatives, or are they clickbait artists and they're just trying to get clicks and views based off of the popularity of conservatives? I do believe this might be a little bit closer to the truth. Maybe it's a little bit in between. What was that? Where's that quote? I wanted to. So, quote, never forget the Biden administration established a disinformation governance board, end quote, Jordan said on Wednesday's edition of Morning Wire. Quote, I mean, the most Orwellian sounding thing you could think of, as if a bunch of bureaucrats that can tell you what to say, you can read, what you can tweet, and what you can post. That was frightening stuff. Like that one Scary Poppins. I forgot what her name was. The wingnut, woke, white woman, DEI Karen. I would say she's a boomer. But she's not. She just hangs out with a bunch of boomer yuppies. You could tell. And this is going to... Hold on. Reading back in the article, European speech laws are creating complications for American social platforms, Jim Jordan said. In particular, the European Union's Digital Services Act and Digital Markets Act could force restrictive European speech codes on Americans. And all this stuff's coming from the WEF, the proto-fascists, who have been, in fact, doing a coup in the back rooms using the WEF because the ESG corporations, they discovered that they could make twice the money off of the fees if they just slapped green onto the label. And then they figured out that they could cover up for their own cringe, exploitative, and predatory behavior. Like if the executives are sleeping with the women and they won't hire women because they don't want to pay pregnancy leave, they have a frat bro culture, they will push feminism. If they have sweatshops where they're using non-white people for slave labor, they will push for anti-racism, especially if they don't want to hire blacks because their GPAs are too low. If they are mega polluters, they're going to be pushing for green energy so that it can distract you from the massive amount of CO2 that they are pumping into the air. And let's see, who had that interview with that woman who was the DEI head at Deutsche Bank who worked for the WEF, and she I think it was trigonometry. She spilled the beans. Like, they were definitely having a cabal where they were trying to utilize basically corporate welfare through ESG to get grants to shift money into green projects so that their Chinese Communist Party counterparts could then manufacture green technology and then sell it to them. And you know, that guy Klaus Schwab, like, dude looks like a certified Bond villain. Like, if you take it, I swear to God, if you clip Klaus Schwab, if you just take his image and then you show a random person this image, they will say, isn't that guy in one of those James Bond movies? Or what was the one dude, Austin Powers, right? They'll just say, oh, that's the guy from the Austin Powers movie, right? But yeah, the EU, like, they're acting like they're a federation, but they don't even have those powers. And then they're doing all this shady stuff behind the scenes with the WEF, with their socialist welfare state that people don't support. They're like locking people up for spicy tweets and then covering up for Muslim rape gangs. And instead of cracking down on the Islamic terrorists, instead they then are cracking down on the white males. Just saying, you'd better shut up and fund your replacement, because if you don't, you're racist. Or maybe you're racist. I personally can't wait for maybe 10 years from now when we don't have to think about any of this stuff, because all of that stuff is just, it's a bunch of nonsense. But let's move into our next story here. From Jacob Savage, The Lost Generation. For 15 years, I've scalped tickets to pay for bills, but in January 2016, I almost managed a real career. I was 31. I've been in Los Angeles for 5 years writing scripts. There have been minor successes, a couple of small projects optioned, and recently started writing with my best friend. We were writing constantly, making each other better, building momentum. Success felt close. But then back then it always did. We'd written pilot scripts that a veteran, let's get this bigger because it's hard for me to read it too. We'd written a pilot script that a veteran showrunner had agreed in a very theoretical, very Hollywood sort of way to, quote, come on, end quote, to. That project had fizzled, so we're surprised that an executive emailed us out of the blue to meet. The showrunner explained that he submitted for us an upcoming writer's room he was going to run, and exec that loved our pilot and wanted to hire us. Honestly, his writing is a little bit hard to read, 100%. Might have something to do with that. Or maybe he just didn't get the practice, you know. That was the moment for our careers we're supposed to take off. We put in our time. I'd been tutoring SATs and reselling tickets to make ends meet while I wrote. And 5 years seemed par for the course based on slightly older guys we knew who'd made it. But of course, by 2016, we're already too late. The showrunner emailed us back apologetically. I had initially thought I might be able to bring you guys on, he wrote, but at the end it wasn't possible. We met with an executive anyways, a Gen X white guy who told us how much he loved our pilot, but the writer's room was small, and he explained apologetically, and the higher level writers were all white men. They could have had an all white male. They couldn't have an all white male room. Maybe if the show got another season, they'd be able to bring us on. They never did. The doors seemed to close everywhere all at once. In 2011, the year I moved to Los Angeles, white men were 48% of the lower level TV writers. By 2024, they accounted for just 11.9%. The Atlantic's editorial staff went from 53% male to 89% male in 2013 to 36% male and 66% male or white in 2024. White men fell from 39% of tenure track positions in the highest at Harvard to in 2024 to 18% in 2023. In retrospect, 2014 was the hinge, the year that DEI became institutionalized across American life. And here is my story about how I was a token race hire who was hired to replace the white males by Portland State University. I was a student ambassador. I was hired because I was an older white male non-traditional student. I was would have been like 30 something at the time. And the team was very diverse, but there was no black people. The boss was a Latina. She had a women's studies degree. And when she hired me, she said that there was like a problem with too many white people and that we needed to recruit minorities because systemic racism. And I didn't really question it at the time. I didn't really think too much. There wasn't any black kids on the student ambassadors. Well, I guess they're not kids, they're college students, right? So one of the things that we did was we would go to schools, public schools, and we would play games with kids, or we'd go to a robotic competition. And we only went to a black school once, and my Latina boss didn't say anything different about that. We did the marshmallow challenge at an all black school, and it was fun. But then we went to a robotics challenge, and my Latina boss said, "We're not recruiting the black kids because their GPAs are not good enough." I didn't really think too much about it at the time, but looking back on it, that was extremely racist. Like, we're supposed to be out there recruiting people for diversity, and what ended up happening is, the women took over, and I ended up getting fired for false claim of sexual harassment because my girlfriend had dumped me, and I lived in Eugene, and I was forced to commute to Portland State University on the Amtrak, and I had to go up there to do a gig at a school, and I said, "Hey, my girlfriend just dumped me. I'm not really feeling that good. It's like 3 hours for me to go up there, and it's not very much money. Can you cover my shift?" And so apparently this is sexual harassment or something, so I got fired. I really should have sued. Looking back, everything about it was messed up. I was hired for racial reasons, to recruit minorities, to replace the white males, and I am a white male. So let's read on because this article gets juicier. And okay, so this was in fact in 2013. So I actually am a witness to this in real time. This was in fact partially my doing. I definitely had a hand in causing this. I mean, obviously I did not instigate this. So my boss, the student ambassadors, Urwell de Ruin, she who blocked me on LinkedIn after I commented that she was being extremely racist against white people because she was going off about how the something about white people weren't being fair to minorities, and then I don't remember the exact specifics, but I knew whenever I posted that comment, I'm like, man, she's gonna block me, even though she was my friend, even though we have a history, like we were student ambassadors, she'll block you. They always do that. I knew she'd do that, but she was being really racist against white people. She just like, she doesn't see it because like so the studies that she was telling all the student ambassadors about were these studies from Harvard Business Review that said that diverse teams are more innovative, diverse, and productive and profitable. Sorry, they were more innovative, profitable, and productive. So we never really read the studies. Later, when I was doing RSS commentary in like 2021 or something, I read the studies and I named them the Doctrine of Diversity Studies. They're a bunch of BS. So they lied through statistics that the teams were like dramatically more productive. So they did not have a control group. In the United States and in Europe, it's illegal to hire teams of all white males. So the corporations that they studied, they had a lot of money and they were hiring the best and the brightest people around the world. And if you did that, there's not a single person out there that would say that we would not expect these teams to be more innovative, productive, and profitable. Because if you hire the best and the brightest, they're probably going to be more productive, profitable, and innovative. Duh. But they were lying through statistics. They showed productivity increases, quote unquote, but they were not really that large. Sometimes they were like 5%. Sometimes they were like 15%. But from the other studies that I read, they were unable to reproduce these results. Seems as if the authors of the study were either extremely reckless in their research or they were flat out lying to us to justify the WEF ESG takeover of the corporations. I couldn't tell you. So reading on the article, says, quote, "The world is not rooting for you. In fact, it's deliberately rooting against you," end quote. In industry after industry, gatekeepers promised extra consideration to anyone who wasn't a white man and then provided just that, quote, "With every announcement of promotions, there was a desire to put extra emphasis on gender or race," a former management consultant recalled. "And when you don't fall into those groups, that message gets louder and louder and gains more and more emphasis." On one hand, you want to celebrate people who have been at a disadvantage. On the other hand, you look and you say, wow, the world is not rooting for you. In fact, it's deliberately rooting against you. Now, you do have to question about whether or not this is actually bad for people, because we do live in a world governed by genetics and physics, and we as living creatures actually require competition and adversity, and when we don't have that, then it's not natural and we have problems that come about from it, like obesity, like mental illnesses. As the Trump administration takes the chainsaw to the DEI apparatus, there's a tendency to portray DEI as a series of well-meaning but ineffectual HR modules. Quote, "Undoubtedly, there's been a ham-fisted DEI programming that is intrusive or even alienating," end quote. I'm going to have to push back on that. It is a mind virus. It is a series of assumptions where if you believe their conclusion that you naturally will end up a batshit crazy leftist lunatic. So, quote, but for the most part, it's relatively benign practice meant to increase diversity while also sending a message that workplaces should be fair and open to everyone. End quote. That's not the way it is at all. It is a opportunity that the people with diversity tickets exploited because it was in the corporate best or perceived best interest. They thought that they would profit from it. But we got to read the rest of the article before I can, I don't want to, spoil the article here. This may be how Boomer and Gen X men experience DEI, but for white male millennials, DEI wasn't a gender rebalancing. It was a profound shift in how power and prestige were distributed. Yet practically none of the thousands of articles and think pieces about diversity have considered the issue by cohort. This isn't a story about white men. It's a story about white male millennials in professional America, about those who stayed and those who mostly stayed quiet. The same industry a decade apart. Meant entirely different professional fates. If you were 40s in 2014, born in 1974, beginning your career in the late 90s, you were already established. If you were 30 in 2014, you hit the wall. And it just so happens that's when I got out of engineering school, and I was unable to graduate because I ran out of money because I did too many majors. I was very close to graduating, and it devastated my life. After that, I tried to start a business. I tried to get a website development job with some friends, but I was too male, too pale, and too stale. So I remember at the startup accelerator having to watch all the girls be on the team with the black people, and I couldn't get a job because I wasn't diverse enough. They liked me, but it was like a mind virus going around. And like the women, they didn't have anywhere near the coding skills as me. I have always been known as a code ninja. But let's see, they wanted to pay people less money to make the websites because they had like a website mill going on. And so I would have been too much money to hire, but I would have worked for it. I would have done it. But, this is just one of the incentives that they have to replace the white males. This isn't a story. Wait, hold on. Because the mandates to diversity didn't fall on older men who in many cases still wield enormous power. They landed on us. Yeah, I definitely feel like they did land on me. So after I was doing my startup for a while, and then the red pill started coming around, and there was some, like this NVIDIA executive posted on Twitter about how she was so proud that women are making more money than men are. And so I posted on her thread, what does feminism do to help black men? And then I got pounced on. And then this account 7 replies guy reposted whatever I was tweeting at these people, which was like just real talk about feminism, just basic cracks in the matrix. And hundreds of thousands of people saw it. And before this, I had been given a invite to go speak at a conference in Germany because I am the author of the Script2 API, which is the serial Chinese room interprocess and telemetry script script protocol, networking protocol, IoT engine in the Chinese room, abstract stack machine, aka the Krabs machine. And I authored the world's fastest way to print an integer, the Puff algorithm. It's in the Script2 wiki on GitHub. It's an excellent computer science research paper. You should definitely read it. Definitely worthy of a master's degree. And it eliminates over half the division instructions from the prior best algorithm, the mod 100 div 100 loop, who the head guy from Facebook, his like the engineering team, he said that that was the best they could do. They tried. They sent in a lot of money on it, but that was the best. So after that, guy wouldn't respond to any of my messages on Twitter. So I got canceled by one of the heads of the NVIDIA Corporation. And I remember getting harassed nonstop by these angry DEI Karens. It was not fun because, first off, I have a business to run and they're occupying a lot of my time. Second, it's like when you get pounced on and then you reply, like people comment on something and like, I want to have a conversation with these people because like I'm friendly, but then it turns into people are emotional creatures and they perceive things differently. Like they don't have a good vocabulary. I have a very, very, very good vocabulary. I'll use words that I just assume people would know, or that I'm not being judicious with understanding that other people misinterpret the definition of words, which I mean, I'm not psychic. I can't really fix that. I look up words. Okay. I got the habit from taking a vocabulary class in college. And other people, what they'll do is they'll kind of make up what they feel a word means and they'll use it usually not in the correct way. If you look it up, it usually doesn't mean whatever you're saying. It's just something I figured out over time. Because people just misinterpret what you say. And, me being a older white male, people immediately want to give me the worst intentions as if I'm like I just want to like use women and I'm like, I have fragile masculinity and white fragility. They use all these emotionally charged buzzwords and then it's like a hive mind where like the hive mind thinkers, they all like they go off of emotion and cognitive dissonance. And cognitive dissonance, the easiest way to describe it is when you hate other groups of people and your brain is primed to believe lies about those people, and then you can turn into a liar. People think cognitive dissonance means you just believe things are wrong and you're stupid. No, it means that people were arguing and you sided with your friend. And now you hold conflicting beliefs because you're a tribalist political hack. That's pretty much the easiest way to describe it. But if you don't know what these words are, I mean, it all seems real to you. So the DEI Karens have been running roughshod over us because, they're hot. They dress in the hot clothes. Like they got the nice job from the diversity tickets. They got the husband that makes all this money. And then they're complaining about how women are underpaid. And then I found a study from the St. Louis Federal Reserve about the breakdown of income by marital status. And, when you lump everyone into one statistic, then yes, women are making like 85 cents on the dollar now. But when you break it up into marital status, married men make twice as much as unmarried men and women. and married women. Married women, unmarried men, and unmarried women all make about the same amount of money. Women spend 90% of a family's money. So these women who are complaining about women being underpaid are in fact actually getting free money they don't have to work for, living high on the horse, and being yuppie boomer Karens and Xena social justice warriors, princesses, being total assholes, pushing some toxic DEI shit for their corporate overlords at the WEF while they talk about how much they hate billionaires, while they are the landowning class. They are the ones who own the businesses. They are the ones who own the eBay stores and the Amazon stores. They are the ones who the anti-capitalists hate. But then they'll say, no, it's the billionaires. They're the robber barons. The people who are making the products dirt cheap for you so that you can live the modern life, they're taking from you. But do not pay any attention to the man behind the curtain. It has nothing to do with the millions, tens of millions of illegal immigrants Biden brought in that are jacking up the rent around the country. And then the rent is now going down because it's supply and demand. We can't build enough houses in time. So therefore, we have to get rid of the illegal immigrants, or else we're going to have to pay sky-high rent. And I live in Oregon. We don't have sales tax. We have property tax. Illegal immigrants have, on average, one extra person per household. So we get less property tax from them here in Oregon. And then now we have to pay for their free health care and their welfare and their food stamps so Democrats can secure their new voter base after they aborted all their children and now they don't have enough population to replace theirs, so they have to import in the third world. And then if you say anything about it, you're a white supreme pizza. You're an all-right extremist. You're way cis. Going back to the article 1, Media Matters, it may be hard to remember now, but decades ago, the privileging critique of American journalism was that it was woefully lacking in gender and racial diversity. There had been hopes that the new media would be different, that the internet might bring a wider range of voices, but by the mid-2010s, that optimism was waning. The new media ventures like Vox, BuzzFeed, and Politico, who we're going to dunk on for some fake news they posted, are trying to shake up the way people get their news and entertainment online. And quote, NPR reported in 2014. But critics say those newsrooms and leadership roles are overwhelmingly made up of white men. Well, yeah, that's because white males work longer hours than everybody else. You know, people say that America has now some of the worst test scores of the modern world. The problem is they're just lumping everyone into one test score. If you actually break it down by racial group and by cohort, you'll find that actually white Americans and Asian Americans have some of the highest test scores around the world. In fact, Asian Americans have the highest test scores in the world, according to this one study that I saw. And it's the same way with the, pay for women. If you lump everyone into one statistic, it looks like women are underpaid, but then you break it down by marital status, and married men make twice as much money as unmarried men and women and married women. It's lying through statistics. You got to be careful with that. If somebody tells you a statistic, your immediate reaction should be, you're a fucking liar. Go back to the article. The critics were mostly right. Gawker was still 57% male and 79% white. Vice was a majority male, 70% white. Well, where the hell are these people located at? Because if you if you live here, I mean, everybody's going to be white because everybody around here is white, dude. I mean, these people are just like, they're so stupid, dude. They lump all the statistics into one. They don't even think about it. At 5:38, Nate Silver complained about a gender gap so severe that only 15% of applicants were from women. Yeah, like most STEM degrees are like that. Look at the percentage of people getting degrees in those fields. Where I live at, University of Oregon, the graduates are 75% women. That's way higher than the national average. It was into this world that Andrew arrived in 2015. He took a job at a prominent new media organization and was put on the general assignment desk, monitoring breaking news and cranking out overnight write-ups. Quote, it was rewarding, end quote, he told me. Quote, but if you imagine working a full-time gig, nights, weekends, then on top of that, trying to build up a beat on the side that could eventually propel you into something sustainable, it was difficult. Definitely know that feeling. Yeah, this is why I always put the Winnie the Pooh dolls. You can see right over there whenever the thing disappears, you know, because Xi Jinping looks like Winnie the Pooh. And Kim Jong-un looks like Winnie the Pooh with Down syndrome. Did you ever notice that? Am I the first person to notice that? I mean, it's totally Winnie the Pooh with Down syndrome. After college, before he moved into journalism, Andrew had worked in the nonprofit world. Ambient talk about diversity and power structures had been a part of the general atmosphere, but he'd never really thought much about it. Quote, in any progressive space, there was always at least some concern about representation, end quote, he explained. Quote, I did not see that in any way impeding my advancement, for the first 6 or 7 years of my career, end quote. But that view came harder to sustain. In 2019, David Haskell, who had been named editor-in-chief of the New York Magazine, was asked to respond to staff disappointment that, quote, another white man, end quote, had been elevated to the role. I understand that reaction. Part of me shares it, end quote, he told his staff. Quote, the most effective way to move the needle on diversity hiring is for strong, loud commitment to come from the very top of the masthead, I plan to do exactly like that, end quote. We will take over the world. Andrew didn't work at New York, but he watched similar pressures reshape his newsroom. He'd been there for 5 years, a beat reporter who couldn't seem to move up. And suddenly, all anybody could talk about were diversity metrics. Management was, as he put it, obsessive about recruiting quote-unquote people of color, which is extremely racist. I am white. White is actually a color. I don't know if you've ever noticed this. Here's a color checker chart. One of the colors on the chart is white. You are being racist by excluding me in people of colors. Now, I would like my reparations but the pool was small and anyone promising was quickly poached by the New York Times or cable. Quote, with all the declarations these newsrooms have been making, the imperatives, already enough white guys already seemed to me to be the mantra, end quote, he told me. Quote, you couldn't help but wonder if that meant you were being passed up for opportunities even in your own organization, end quote. Institutions pursuing diversity decided that there was no backsliding. If a position was vacated by a woman or a person of color, the expectation is that it would be filled by another woman or a person of color. Quote, the hope was that you were going to hire a diverse candidate, end quote, a senior hiring editor at a major outlet told me, quote, if there was a black woman at the beginning of her career you wanted to hire, you could find somebody ... If she was any good, you knew that she would get accelerated to the New York Times or Washington Post in short order, end quote. These guys are so desperate to hang out with women at work. They do this shit. It is really, it's just the dudes trying to get tits around them while they're at work. Do you really need that shit? The truth is, after years of concerted effort, most news outlets had already reached a quietly surpassed gender parity. By 2019, newsrooms of ProPublica, the Washington Post, the New York Times, and were majority female, as were news media upstarts like Vice, Vox, BuzzFeed, and the Huffington Post. Because how can you sleep with your female coworkers when you do not hire women? These guys could not get laid without a diversity ticket. In the aftermath of St. George Floyd of fentanyl's death, newsrooms tripped over themselves to stage a, quote, reckoning, end quote, of the New York Times solemnly promised, quote, sweeping, end quote, reforms on top of the sweeping reforms it had already promised. The Washington Post declared it would become, quote, the most diverse and inclusive newsroom in the country, end quote. CNN pledged a, quote, sustained commitment, end quote, to race coverage, while Bon Appetit confessed that, quote, our mastheads had been far too white for far too long. Correction, I have not been white for long enough. Thank you very much. And that the magazine had, quote, tokenized many BIPOC staff and contributors, end quote. NPR went further still, declaring that diversity was nothing less than its North Star. These weren't empty slogans either. In 2021, new hires at Condé Nast were just 25% male and 49% white. At California, well, it depends on what part of the country you're in. I mean, where? I don't know where this place is. I couldn't tell you. Where is Condé Nast located at? New York City. Okay. Oops. Okay. So New York City is only 37.5% white. Okay. That would be more than the general population of white people. Unfortunately, I don't think that they noticed that. At the California Times parent company, the Los Angeles Times and San Diego Union Tribune, although a lot of people are applying for jobs in New York City that are from out of the city, so you got to take that into account. They were just 39% male and 31% white. That year, ProPublica hired 66% women and 58% people of color, which they ever so racistly excluded white from the list of colors. At NPR, 78% of new hires were people of color. Can we just say non-white people? Do we always have to say people of color? I mean, come on, just get around the bush. For a typical job, we get a couple of hundred applicants, probably at least 80 from white guys. And, quote, the hiring editor recalled, quote, it was given that we were going to hire the best person, ... It was jarring how we would talk about excluding the white guys. And, quote, the pipeline hadn't changed much. White men were still nearly half of the applicants, but they were now filling closer to 10% of the open positions. Suddenly, in Andrew's newsroom, everything was driven by identity. There were endless diversity trainings, a racial, quote, climate, end quote, assessment. At one point, reporters were told that they had to catalog in minute detail the identity characteristics of their sources. Wow. Whew. Is that... Can you say that that's scientific racism there? I mean, if you ask me, that looks just like scientific racism right there. Andrew had been instrumental in forming the union at his company and objected when negotiations shifted from severance pay and parental leave to demand for racial quotas. They wanted to, like, emergency hires of black people. He said... Quick, you guys, it's an emergency. There's too many white guys. Find me a Negro. When he questioned these no priorities, the response was swift. Quote, on a Zoom call, women could clap back at something probably more like henpeck as something that was trying to, I was saying, or other women would snap their fingers in the chair in the chat. They do that shit. They do that when they want to, like, put you in your place. And especially the weak ones. It was like a whole subcultural language was being introduced in wholesale. End quote. Now, you can look it up. Henpecking is actually a thing. It's proven by the videos that women post. When they're bashing on men, they will just... desperate for advancement, he'd had the same job, the same title for nearly 6 years. I mean, do you really always have to get in... I mean, what's wrong with being at the same job for 6 years? Andrew looked elsewhere. Quote, I applied for positions at the Atlantic, Politico, CNN, The Washington Post, and 3 desks at the New York Times, end quote, he told me. But newsrooms were contracting, which only made the competition even more intense. Quote, when scarcity sets in, you start to worry about these things a little bit more, end quote, Andrew reflected. This was a business model problem that was exacerbated by the racial and gender preference problem. At the Atlantic, Andrew didn't even get an interview. Jeff Goldsberg, the editor-in-chief, had described his hiring philosophy back in 2019, quote, by opening up the possibilities of younger people, women, and people of color, by imagining their rise in a deliberate way, we've just widened the pool of potential leadership. There's no quota system here, end quote. You know, when you give somebody a job that they really didn't care that much for, just because they're like attractive or young, they don't really do that good in the job. You know, you'd rather have somebody who wants to do the job, who isn't as good when they start, than somebody who is good when they start, but they don't actually want the job. Chances are they're just going to use it as a stepping stone to get to their next job. So all your training money is just going to be set on fire and given to another company. Goldberg was candid about another less comfortable reality. Quote, it's really, really hard to write a 10,000 word cover story, end quote. He had said that time in that same interview, quote, there's not a lot of journalists in America who can do it. The journalists in America who can do it are almost exclusively white males, end quote. Personally, I'm in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. I had to like do my own appeal, which took a month. And it was very complicated. I had to sit there for like 10 to 12 hours a day, working nonstop. Very few breaks. It was just like Groundhog Day, nonstop writing papers all day. Almost nobody wants to do stuff like that. It's one of those things where very few people who don't have like an entrepreneurial spirit or grew up around people with degrees who are self-motivated. Like for most people, they would just assume they have to have a professional do that stuff. For me personally, I cut my own hair. I make my own electronics. I program my own firmware, program my own software, my own network APIs. I don't get child support from the baby mama. I have to do everything myself. So I'm 100% used to doing that. Most people, they'll just expect other people's got to do stuff. Me personally, I've found that whenever I do that, it's generally a bad outcome and gives me bad behavior. Going back to the article, with or without quotas, the Atlantic succeeded in hiring fewer of these white males since 2020. About 2/3 of the Atlantic's hires have been women, along with nearly 50%, quote unquote, people of color, end quote, even though white males make up 2/3 of America. But I don't know, where is the Atlantic located at? The Atlantic headquarters. Washington, D.C. Okay. And that's mostly black people around there. So you would actually expect there to be mostly black people there, because in Washington, D.C., it is mostly black people. The Atlantic announced that 3/4 of the editorial hires in the past year had been women and 69% people of color. It doesn't actually... Well, that's higher than the percent of black people in Washington, D.C. The colleges are giving, 2/3 of the graduates are women nowadays. So that does actually match up with the percent of people getting degrees. I would imagine people get degrees. They want to go work for a newspaper to cut their teeth. So, I mean, I'm not too suspicious of the numbers, because they were looking at the applications and they're like, well, yeah, I mean, it's 2/3 of the people are women that just got out of college, right? And anybody who actually has half a brain is staying as far away from the Atlantic as they can possibly get. The boomers are retired, so now they're out of boomer Karens, and now all they got are mentally ill millennial cat ladies. The irony was, where older white men remained in charge, especially where they remained in charge, there was almost no room to move up. If you hired a team of white guys around you, you were putting a target on your back. End quote, recalled the hiring editor at the New York Times Magazine, one of the most few prestige magazines with a public masthead. What is a masthead? Oh, like the front page? Okay. Because, that used to be the way you distribute newspapers. Jake Silverstein, a Gen X white man, serves as editor-in-chief, and Bill Wazik, another Gen X white man, serves as editorial director. But the 9 millennial senior editors and story editors below them were just one white guy, and he'd been there since 2012, effectively grandfathered in. At the very bottom of the ladder, the picture is a little bit different. Since 2020, only 7.7% of Los Angeles Times interns have been white men. Between 2018 and 2024, of the roughly 30 summer interns each year at Washington Post, just 2 or 3 were white males. In 2015, coincident with the certain political shifts, the Post intern class had 7 white guys, numbers not seen since way back in 2014. In 2018, the New Yorker replaced its summer internship with a long-time fellowship. Just 10% of the nearly 220 followers had been white men. Other pipelines dried up as well. The alt weeklies that gave misfit young men their start had shed them entirely. There are no white men in the editorial staff of the Seattle Stranger on the staff of the Indie Week. As late as 2017, there was 6 white men atop the masthead of the Portland Mercury. By 2014, there was just one. The Boomer editor-in-chief. Seems to be a repeating narrative here. The people at the top who would normally get replaced because they're old white males and they'd be facing age discrimination are now using DEI as a way to keep their jobs. That is just so shady. It is. It's just, it's slimy. I was in that cohort in 2014. I graduated right at the height of DEI. So those people that they harmed were me. Quote, the femaleness is striking, end quote, a well-known Gen X reporter with the impeccable liberal bona fide confided. Bona fides confided. Quote, it's like, wow, where have the guys gone? End quote. In less than a decade, the entire face of the industry changed from the New York Times the New York Times newsroom had gone from 57% male and 78% white in 2015 to 46% male and 66% white in 2024. Condé's Nast today is just 35% male and 60% white. BuzzFeed, a media operation that had been just 52% male and 78% white in 2014, when I graduated from college, was just 36% male and 54% white. Well, I didn't graduate. Okay. That's when I ran out of money because I took too many classes. If you ask me, it's about as close to graduating as I actually need. But nothing explains the new media story quite like Vox, whose explainers dominated 2010's discourse and whose internal demographics capture the decade's professional shift. Back in 2013, when Ezra Klein came under fire for his startup's lack of diversity, Vox Media was just 82% male, 88% white. By 2022, the company was just 37% male and 59% white. And by 2025, leadership was 73% female. Quote, the demographic shift reshaped not only who told the stories, but which stories got told, end quote. And then you'll notice all of the Hollywood movies at that time started turning into woke garbage. And the CCP was starting to allow Hollywood to make twice as much money on their movies in China. So Hollywood started manipulating the movies so that they can make more money in China. and they became like a military psyop. Where was I at? After St. George Floyd of fentanyl's death, Andrew's colleague Lucas was assigned a piece about why you should never call the police. Quote, I remember having to interview one of the abolitionists for a story about how someone breaks into your car or into your home. It's white supremacy to call the cops. Oh my God. So like people put them up to it? I remember reading these articles. In fact, I probably read a number of these articles on this channel. That just sounds batshit crazy, dude. Even if you need it for an insurance report, Lucas told me, it was always made me feel gross, like back on that with a lot of regret. Sorry, I think back on that with a lot of regret. I'm a little bit rusty at reading articles, if you couldn't tell. I used to flow better, but channel's been down for 3 years. Quote, newsrooms were center-left places in 2005, and, quote, the prominent Gen X reporter told me, quote, now they're incredible leftist places, ... I imagine one reason newsrooms have gotten more explicitly lefty is that, you know, you have white guys and you have white women adopting a kind of protective collaboration, allyship mindset to get through the door. So in order to get through the door, you got to be woke. You got to preach about how you're against racism and misogyny, and then you're never going to criticize the Muslims, because if you criticize the Muslims, then you're racist. So you can't be a feminist and criticize Muslims, because being a feminist means you're against racism too. And that means that you have to allow Muslims to be misogynists, because that's a cultural thing. If you don't, you're a racist. All right, extremist. You bad. Gonna have to get rid of you. Andrew, for his part, was unable to adopt the performative allyship that had been expected. Quote, I always thought I was an effeminate? Yeah, effeminate nerd growing up, ... But my way of expressing myself now puts me on the most masculine end of the men in the media. Quote, he told me, quote, I started picking up the one fact that there wasn't much room for people who even speak in my timber. He was recruited for a senior reporter position at a more prestigious outlet, quote, jumping through hoops every step of the way, and, quote, as he told me, but by the end, it felt like a cruel joke. Extensive interviews, writing tests, endless meetings with various editors, and only to find out months later that the job had gone to someone a decade younger than him. A gay man of color who managed to go from the intern to the assistant editor to senior reporter in less than 2 years. I bet I read a bunch of their fake news articles on this show. It was fake news, baby! Quote, if you're a white man, you gotta be a superstar. And, quote, Andrew told me, quote, you can't help feeling like no matter how good you are, you were born in the wrong year, end quote. I'm going to have to say I've definitely fallen victim to this as an engineer. I had to start my own startup because all this DEI crap shit and the state use of preponderance of evidence. And so I have to be dramatically better, because in this industry, if you're not dramatically better, you're just not competitive. You're wasting your time, wasting your resources. You could have made money working for some other corporation. And it's like a nonstop hamster wheel of stuff. You have to like keep up with the AI revolution. You know, you have to know how a transformer architecture works. You got to be able to do multivariable calculus. In my particular field, I need to know quantum mechanics, be able to do some energy calculations. I need to do general relativity. And for me, personally, I definitely feel like this has alienated me from people, because when I do talk about any of this stuff, people that I know from back in the day generally just think I'm trying to brag. Really, that's just what I'm doing that day. I just do hardcore things. But for most people, they're like struggling. They're emotionally broken from everything. Their baby mama, grad school, their family, ... And so they can't really take it. They're weak. And then they start blaming you. You're the reason. You're the one that is why they're not doing so good, because when they compare themselves to you, they're not doing good. I just would like to take a moment to talk about how stupid and crazy people are looking at my life, saying shit like that. All right. But hey, we definitely love them. Yeah, but you can't be doing that shit. As he saw it, the industry had its super successful white guys who'd made it before in 2014 were functionally Gen X, but for everyone else, moving up the contracting industry was nearly impossible. Quote, I was kind of grandfathered in during one area and had achieved a level going into the 2015 to 2014 or 2024 where it just didn't really affect me, end quote. One of those superstar journalists told me. It really affected me because that was when I was trying to get my career established. And I definitely struggled to even get scraps. You know, even to get people to like treat me decent because I was so poor. I have to cut my own hair. I still cut my own hair. You can see it's a little bit kind of whack right now, but I have a magnification mirror, so it's getting better. But I do wish that I could afford nice clothes and to get a haircut from somebody who can make me look good. But that's like a luxury I'm not getting. Maybe if I was like didn't graduate when I graduated from the woke Karen school, maybe a bit different. 2, the ivory tower. There are many stories we tell ourselves about race and gender, especially in academia, but the one thing everyone I spoke to seemed to agree on is that it's best not to talk about it, at least in public, at least not with your name attached. The humanities are so small, end quote. A millennial professor nervously explained, quote, there's a difference between thinking someone and making common knowledge that you think it, end quote, said another. Sorry, did I say someone? There's a difference between thinking something and then making common knowledge that you think it, end quote, said another. Making common knowledge that you think it. Okay. Yeah, so he's saying like just you thinking something is a lot different than making other people think that you're thinking that thing. I never really thought about that, but I think that's profound. Definitely 100% true. So it came as a bit of a shock when David Austin Walsh, a Yale postdoc and left-wing Twitter personality, decided to donate any chance he had at a career with a single tweet. Quote, I'm 35 years old. I'm 4+ years into a PhD, and quite frankly, I'm a white dude, end quote, he wrote on X. Quote, Combining those factors together, and I'm in, for all intents and purposes, unemployable in the 21st as a 21st century American historian, end quote. With an LLM, yeah, maybe. I also think a lot of people's version of history is completely fake. So maybe they should be employed. The pile on was swift and vicious. You're all just laughable, he wrote in the New York Times. Nicole Hannah Jones. Quote, have you seen the data on the professorships? End quote. Quote, white males are 30% of the U.S. population, but nearly 40% of the faculty. End quote, tweeted a tenured professor at GWU. Quote, hard to make the case for systemic discrimination, end quote. Okay. So what city do they live in? This is, that's where? New York Times? Isn't it like, yeah, like 37 some odd percent white people in New York City? Yeah, white people are a minority there. It didn't matter that as far back as 2012, women were more likely to be tenure track across humanities than men, or that the 2015 peer-reviewed study suggested that a STEM hiring favored women. The one study that I saw from someone pretending to be women hiring for jobs showed like that they were like 11,000 times more likely to get called back for an interview. So yeah, I mean, that's the, you know, that shouldn't happen for sure. Or they even CUPAHR is an association academic DEI professionals found that assistant professors of color, 35%, and female assistants, 52%, are overrepresented in comparison to U.S. doctoral recipients, which are 32% and 44%, respectively. When they're overrepresented, then you never hear them complain that there's too many non-white people, not enough white people. It's only going to come one way. Boy, this article is really long. Let me think about this. Can I actually make it down to the end of the article? I don't think I can make it to the end of the article because, like, I've been here for an hour and a half, and I can't really read the whole article. I'm going to let you read it. Just look up The Lost Generation. We got to the point where we got the meat and potatoes of it. And I think that my experience that I shared about how I was a token race hire for Portland State University student ambassadors with the job of recruiting minorities to replace the white people. You get it. It's, you got to look into the ESG stuff going on at the WEF to get a full picture of this. I wish I had read the whole article. I watched Primogen react on it. But, whew. I would have thought that I would have actually read the whole thing in that period of time. The ivory tower is a metaphor for the racist power structure created by the Democrats. And so back in the day, the Democrats were the ones that were... So Democrats were started by Andrew Jackson. They had a lot of hunters. And so they were known for collecting ivory in Africa when they went hunting. And so the ivory tower is a metaphor for the corporations, the skyscrapers, the people who run the WEF, the mega corporations, the Bohemian Grove, all this, the secret societies, that are pulling the strings in the corporate world. And so the people up top, they ivory tower, they utilize what is called game theory, power to the powerful dynamics. So they do not play the same games that we play. The game that we play as a normal person is that we have to be nice, get a good job, get a degree, rise up the corporate ladder, don't rock the boat, don't insult anybody, play nice with everybody, and then maybe you'll get a promotion, and then maybe you won't be poor anymore. But the people up top, they ivory tower, they turn other people against each other, because when we cooperate, we become strong and we rise up, and then we become a threat to them. We're competition. So they do things like woke stuff, DEI Karen stuff, luxury beliefs, that when they believe these things, it benefits them. But for the average person, when they believe these things, it's devastating for them. Like if they put off having children to rise up the corporate ladder, and then they never rise up the corporate ladder, and then they gave up their children for nothing, never materialized. They're still trying to afford the home, trying to pay off the student loans, and then now they're a millennial cat lady who has a closet full of the best deals on boxed wine and cat litter in town. And they have 4 cats, plus they feed 3 strays. And they're always commenting on my posts about how I'm the big bad wolf and that I'm a bad person because I know what a woman is, and because I don't think I need to be a biologist. So this woman named Ashley makes a lot of really good videos on YouTube about power for the powerful dynamic. I would highly recommend you go check them out. She'll explain it in more detail. So with that, I'm going to move on to the next article here. All right. In our next story from WCVB Boston, let me redo that. In our next story from WCVB 5 ABC Boston, MIT nuclear physicist shooter knew each other and were classmates in Portugal before the murder. This was the Brown University shooter. Brown University is a private university, not a public university. This guy, and we don't have a picture of him. So the motive sought after suspect in Brown University shooting, MI professor's killing found dead, officials said. The suspect in the December 13th mass shooting at Brown was found dead by suicide Thursday night in a storage unit in Salem, New Hampshire, authorities said. He'd been identified as 48-year-old Claudio Manuel Nueves Valente, a former Brown grad student. The 2 students were killed and 9 were wounded in the shooting. The one female student killed was the vice president of the student Republicans. The teacher of the class was Jewish. So there had been some theories going around that it was targeted assassination and that they were targeted because the teacher was Jewish and possibly the shooter hated Israel. It does not appear that that's true. Valentine is also believed to be responsible for the shooting death of the MIT professor 2 days earlier in Brookline, Massachusetts. Federal prosecutors said late Thursday. Officials said the suspect previously attended the same university in Portugal as the MIT professor who was killed, 47-year-old Nuno Lourenço. Both studied physics and are believed to have known each other. An autopsy report released Friday showed the suspect is estimated to have died on Tuesday, December 16th. Brown shooting occurred in the school of Barris and Hawley Engineering Building during final exams in the first floor classroom where students were taking part in a study session. And this appears to be why he did it, is because he had some sort of beef going on with the one dude, the MIT professor, because he blamed him for getting, kicked out of the program? Prior to Thursday, investigators had struggled to obtain clear security images of the persons of interest in the Brown University shooting to determine his possible whereabouts in the wake of the shooting. What's the other thing? And from the Providence Journal, Claudio Neves Volente, what you need to know about Brown MIT shooter. There's the loser's face. So he studied at Brown 25 years ago. It doesn't appear that he knew anyone that was there. He didn't have any connection to any anti-Israeli or pro-Palestinian causes. So it does just look like this guy probably got thrown under the DEI bus because he's a white male. He's not young and diverse enough. And then he probably took it out on the person that he blamed for him not getting his PhD. And as someone who is probably going to be going back for a PhD because I'm the author of the theory of gradient relativity, I invented a model of the atom where the electron is condensed space. It gets in the atom when electrons excite into higher energy levels. And, you could just imagine that the space, like photon's not like a particle, it doesn't actually hit an atom. It's an EM wave, and it oscillates the atom. The electron goes into a higher energy state, and then, so it's like you imagine you got a string. I don't want to sound like I'm going into the string theory. I'm not. But you pull back on the string, and then you let the string, like say you take the end of the string and you pull back part of the string, and then you let it go. And then, so when you pull back the string, it displaces it, and then you've displaced space, and then the oscillation of the space is kind of like a trick shot in pool where you line up all the pool balls together. It's called the McCullough model of the electron. So, me personally, if I actually go back to college, I've already got my PhD thesis mostly written. I'm almost done. So I'm gonna call bullshit on this guy. I'm an engineer too. This guy had nothing to do with this guy not getting his PhD. This was entirely this guy's life choices, because I haven't even started the PhD program, and I already have the thesis done, and I just have to go do research. In fact, I got another thesis paper, my world's fastest integer to string algorithm, Puff, in the Script2 wiki on GitHub. Excellent computer science paper. If you're interested in algorithm optimization, utilizes discrete mathematics to eliminate over half the division instructions from the prior fastest algorithm, the mod 100 div 100 loop. And so I just think that this, I feel horrible about this, because this guy was one of us. He was one of the guys, and he just flipped. It's like he obviously hit the end of his rope. I mean, the reason why he's doing this and he's got all this anger is because he's not actually focusing on his art. Me personally, there's no way in hell I would have any time to do this. Like, I have an aerospace company. I'm building drones. I'm trying to, like, catch the money when it falls from the new FCC ban of imported drone parts. You know, I already got my drone platform. Already got my parts picked out. You know, I'm making my PCBs for my flight controller so I could sell those, and my software-defined radio and my radar. Like, I got it all ready to go. I'm fitting to move, bro. I would never have any time to do anything like this. But I can kind of understand the blame that this guy's got. Because, you know, I've been screwed over. I've been thrown under the bus. I've got thrown under the DEI bus. Yeah, I've had the boomer Karens and the yuppie millennial cat ladies coming after me nonstop for years, bro. It's like you develop a thick skin for it. Especially in the industry that we're in. I mean, the floor just got pulled out from the cost. Like, I got a supercomputer at my house that I'm doing this live stream on. You know, RTX 3090 GPU. You know, it's got 20 core Intel CPU, 96 gigs of RAM. Like, that's giant, dude. I got an electronics lab. I got like 10 3D printers. My friends got all the CNC machines. So, like, I can do things with very low amounts of money. Whatever he did, you know, it's like, this is just some bullshit blaming mentality. Well, he should have been strong. He should have used his time to develop his own business, so he didn't need a PhD or worked for a startup. Maybe he did work for a startup and it went bankrupt, and that's why he did this. But it seems like he was taken over by anger. Oh, there was that one quote. Where's that one quote? Ego. I'm looking for the word ego. Ego. All right, here's the quote. As investigators work to learn more about Claudio Nueves Valentino and understand what prompted his violent rage, former classmates and colleagues in Portugal are describing him as a talented but egotistical failed academic who could have been motivated by professional jealousy. And looking at this guy, oops, that's the next story. Got to get through these as fast as possible. It is Christmas. Merry Christmas, by the way. I hope that your family is doing well. Where's the picture of the dude? I'm sorry. I'm bombing here. So this guy. Now, I'm overweight, so don't get me wrong. This guy, he's overweight. He's not working out. He's bald. The women don't want him anymore. I think that he's angry that he hasn't had sex in 20 years. And he's blaming the other people. Am I right? Does this seem to be accurate? Is this guy actually a fat, pudgy beta male incel who blames other people when it is in fact actually him who is the loser because he baited out and he didn't invest his time doing anything worthwhile, so then he went and gunned down other people. We've talked about this loser enough. Let's move on to this next article. Yeah, that one didn't make me happy. In our next article from The Guardian, from Russia, Russian general killed by car bomb in Moscow, says investigators. The bomb was at the front. A Russian general had been killed after an explosive device detonated beneath his car in what Moscow described as likely assassination carried out by Ukrainian intelligence services. Yeah, they got those fancy AI drones, so they're probably watching everything he's doing. It's probably like some sleeper drone that just shows up and then props down. It's got like a solar panel and some AI chips, and it just scans everything around. The day before, sometime last week, Ukraine blew up 2 of those $500 million submarines. They also blew up 2 Su-30 planes. Not blew up. Some alleged Russian separatists set the planes on fire. Is that the word I'm looking for? Separatists? Partisans? Some partisans in Russia. Reading on in the article, Lieutenant General Fentanyl Savros, the head of the Operational Training Directorate of the Russian Armed Services General Staff, died of his injuries. And the world is celebrating. A spokesperson for Russia's investigative committee said in a statement, quote, investigators are pursuing numerous lines of inquiry regarding the murder. Is it a murder? Is it murder like when you take out an enemy combatant? Well, I mean, it was illegal in Russia, right? So by that sense, I mean, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter, right? So the bomb, what am I saying? Russian Telegram channels with links to the security services report that Savrov's car exploded while driving along Yezneva Street in Moscow about 7 a.m. Monday, killing the driver inside. According to reports, the vehicle had been traveled several meters before the blast went off. Savrov, I think it's Savrov. This guy, I watch a lot of Ukrainian news, and he comes up a lot. Actually, this guy was a big deal. What was he like? Didn't he was like the general, like some training stuff, right? I don't remember exactly. Don't quote me on that. Savrov, who oversees combat training. Yeah. Combat training and readiness for Russia's armed forces in the war in Ukraine, has extensive experience in the Kremlin's post-Soviet wars. He took part in both Chechen wars and later played a role in his organizing of Russia's 2015 through 2016 military intervention in Syria. Oh, wow. This guy is a major dirtbag piece of shit. It's really just a shame what happened in Syria. I think it was a major mistake that we didn't fight Russia in Syria, because 600,000 people died in that Syrian war. Like Putin and Bashar al-Assad, the butcher, leveled Aleppo, which was, a city of like 120,000 people. And I think, was that the first city that Putin completely leveled, like a major city? I know he invaded Georgia. I think that was when he learned that he could just do what he wants. That he can take hegemony, because the U.S. will just back down because they're controlled by the anti-war movement, by the boomer DEI Karens and the mentally ill, yuppie, millennial, woke white women. The awfuls, the affluent, white, urban liberal. Dmitry Petrov, the Kremlin spokesperson, who is a total scumbag, described Savrov's death as a, quote, terrible murder, end quote. And then Kale from RSS Commentary said that it was the best thing to happen on that particular day. Other officials and prominent pro-war voices had called for swift retribution for the attack, the third bombing in Moscow in the year in the past year to claim the life of a senior Russian officer linked to the invasion. Yeah, that's what happens when you level people's cities and kill their family. They come and track you down. Yeah, maybe you shouldn't like invade and annex countries and level cities and torture and murder people, because that's absolutely a horrible thing. And so, moving on into this next story that is absolutely deplorable from the Gateway Pundit. Dark Christmas, unhinged Zelensky hints he was waiting for Trump to pass away for Ukraine to join NATO. Says his holiday wish is for Putin to die. You know, that's actually my holiday wish. I actually don't want any presents. I actually do wish that Putin was dead. That would be great. Z has gone overboard with this latest remarks. For years, Volodymyr Zelensky had been painted by the MSM as a heroic defender of democracy. Yeah, he is. A present-day Winston Churchill. Yeah, that's the closest president that you could actually compare the guy to. And any questions of him was surely to be described as a work of Putin shills and puppets, like the Gateway Pundit. But that was then, and this is now, when Zelensky has been revealed as a failing leader of an incredibly corrupt country, rife with real-life Nazis and dealing with an alleged nasty drug habit. You see, this is the crock of shit stuff that they were censoring on Twitter with the Twitter files. So the thing about the Twitter files that most people don't understand, because they're not a nerd like me, they don't study military psyops and propaganda. So whenever Putin was gearing up for the invasion of Ukraine, not the annexing of Crimea, the 22 invasion, the Russian military had Russian troll farms, one of them owned by, what was that guy's name? The Wagner head, Prigozhin. Yeah. Yevgeny Prigozhin. The other guy was he was a major piece of shit, but he was much more principled than the other monsters that are running the Russian military. The guy was an ideologue who actually believed that shit. And, I mean, yeah, I'm glad he's dead, but, we kind of wish he was in control over the other guys, because he at least had principles. Citizens of the Western countries now know much more of their taxpayer money sent to the Kiev regime was stolen by people closely connected to Zelensky himself. Okay, so first off, and I probably wouldn't have even brought this up, this article, but these jackass Vatnik brainwashed morons, you could tell when they spell it like this. So Kiev is the capital of Ukraine. This is the Russian spelling. It's spelled, the Ukrainian spelling is K-Y-I-V or E-I-V. Is that, sorry. K-Y-I-V. So the thing is, if you Google Kiev, K-I-E-V, you're going to get articles that show up that are Russian propaganda. If you Google K-Y-I-V, you're probably going to get articles that are pro-Ukraine. And the reason why is because these people know what they're doing when they write Kiev. The Gateway Pundit, these guys are propagandists, dude. Who is this Paul Sermon jackass? This guy. Ugly, fat, beta male, wimp, loser, scumbag, Vatnik, trash, piece of shit. I really do hate this guy. I hate these people. They don't care. Oh, sorry. Let me go back to the Twitter thing. So, at the start of the Ukraine invasion, they were putting out a lot of the Russian military was putting out a lot of propaganda about Ukrainians being Nazis. The reason for that is when Russia annexed Crimea, there was some neo-Nazis that lived in the Donbass. There was like maybe a couple of hundred of them. And they volunteered for Azov. You know, there's a couple of hundred people in most neo-Nazis in most big cities, especially in Russia. There's a lot of neo-Nazis in Russia. But the neo-Nazi guys were fierce warriors for Azov. They scored a lot of kills. They were the most patriotic ones. Some of the most patriotic ones. I didn't mean they were the patriotic ones. They weren't like neo-Nazis, but like you got to understand the history of the Holodomor famine genocide. I would recommend that you first read the book Disinformation by the KGB defector General Lieutenant Ion Pacepa so that you can get a good understanding of how the communists invented protocols of Elder Zion to frame the Jews for the mass murder of the kulaks, who are the peasant farmers when they collectivized the farms. And then they caused the Holodomor famine genocide that killed 6 million Ukrainians, I think like 8 or 10 million people total. And so the Ukrainians got the brunt of World War II. So when you're talking about victims of Nazis in World War II, Ukrainians were definitely up there. They suffered the brute mass murder, torture, victimization, oppression from the communists and the Nazis. But they had the famine genocide, the Holodomor, and then the Nazis liberated Ukraine from the Russians. And the Russians were worse. So in Ukraine, they have a different perspective on the Nazis. You got to understand with the Holocaust that the reason why that happened is not because they hated Jews. In fact, most Nazis did not hate Jews. It was very rare that Nazis hated Jews. Nazis hated Zionists because of the protocols of Elder Zion. They thought Jews controlled the world. They hated the Jews that controlled the world. They did not actually hate normal Jews. They also, too, did not hate black people. Germans have never been known as anti-black racist because they did not engage in the transatlantic slave trade. And they often used anti-racism and abolitionism to create coalitions of trading partners and empire expansion with the African tribes. So Hitler did not view black people as inferior because they had a long culture. Like the Chinese, he didn't view them as inferior because he thought that the dominant cultures were like more advanced genetically because they had just invented genetics. They didn't really understand what was going on. People had a whole lot of theories. This is what people don't understand. People had a lot of different theories about genetics. Like Hitler mentioned stuff about Jews being genetically inferior, but like they believed a lot of different things. They said a lot of different things over the years. People will take quotes out as to what Hitler said, as to what they meant, but the reality is they defamed Jews on purpose to overthrow capitalism by portraying the Jews as all that is wrong with capitalism. And it's because, the Rothschilds ran the banks, and they were a smaller minority, so they couldn't stick up for themselves because there was way more people attacking them, and people didn't want to stick up for them because they were too small of a group and they couldn't really stick up for themselves. But 0.7 of Hitler's, 25 points of Hitler's Nazi Party says if they run out of food, they're going to deport the Jews. If they had deported the Jews to Russia, the USSR would have gotten millions of citizens and at least 500,000 able-bodied males who are ready and willing to fight because the Nazis killed their family and took all their stuff. And they wanted payback. So that's why they killed the Jews. It's obvious that's why they killed the Jews. You cannot argue that that's why they killed the Jews, because they literally said it. It's literally in the 25 points of Hitler's Nazi Party. It says it very clear. I was the one that discovered that, by the way. That's actually my discovery. It's not actually publicly known. I just am pretty good at doing research. So, these people, I mean, I can only hate them so much because the whole point of the Russian worldview, aka the Ruski Mir, is that they're portraying Russia as the good guys fighting the good fight. They had to invade Ukraine because Ukraine was a threat. NATO is expanding, so they have to like annex the territory next to NATO to get them closer to NATO. It's like, no, really why Russia invaded Ukraine was because Ukraine was trying to join the EU, and then they were trying to join NATO. And it was Russia was engaging in what they thought was rational actor behavior. Rational actor means that it doesn't mean that you're behaving, you're doing the right thing, or you're behaving good or morally. It means that you are self-optimizing. Like you would expect people to just do the thing that optimizes themselves. An irrational actor is somebody who makes really risky bets. They do reckless behavior, where they're completely negligent, and then they over self-optimize. So they make a bet that their ass can't cash. They will, like Putin, he thought he could just waltz into Ukraine. It would be over in like a week, and then they would be able to take over the entire country, and they would get like 45 million new citizens, and they would get control of the Black Sea. It was a cost-benefit risk-reward analysis. It's best to say that Ukraine was on sale at that point in time, and after they joined NATO, then Ukraine would no longer be on sale. On sale meaning that you could buy it for a price that justified the risk and the cost. That is by definition what the rational actor theory of the offensive realism school says. Now, the problem with that is that Putin made a extremely risky bet. It was very reckless, and he was not a rational actor. He was, in fact, an irrational actor who was a greedy over self-optimizer who has destroyed his country, destroyed his economy, mass murdered over 1 million people. He's ruined all the tribes that are in the Russian Federation. They've destroyed their future. They haven't been recruiting people from Moscow, except for like the homeless people, like the riffraff. They've been taking people from the tribal areas, like in Siberia and near Kazakhstan, all the border regions, and then sending them on the meat wave attacks. And they've only been able to do it so long. They've run out of people to do meat wave attacks, and now they're doing these trying to sneak through defenses and then do surprise attacks. Anytime they get a bunch of troops together, they get hammered by drones and artillery. But if you listen to these Vatnik is somebody who's brainwashed by the Ruski Mir, the Russian worldview. They're going to paint it like Ukraine's corrupt because Ukraine had a history of corruption. But the thing is, why was Ukraine even corrupt in the first place? Ukraine was corrupt because it used to be part of the USSR, and when they left, the USSR was buying off politicians, or sorry, the Russian Federation was buying off politicians. The President Yanukovych of Ukraine, he stole about $70 billion, billions for himself. He was caught with like $3 billion, I think. I don't remember the exact numbers. He had one of the most extravagant mansions in the entire world. And Ukraine is one of the poorest countries. He was a Russian asset. The people of Ukraine voted to join the EU. Instead, the corrupt Russian stooge, Yanukovych, instead did not do what the people wanted, and he sided with Russia. And since he stole so many billions of dollars, the people were forced to overthrow. That was the Maidan Revolution. It wasn't a CIA-backed coup. It was legitimately no people who are free, who have good morals and are citizens as opposed to subjects, can actually allow that kind of behavior. That is a tyrannical government. But people don't look at the facts. All they saw was they saw those pictures of Azov Nazis. They're like, see, we see 20, 30 Nazis and they're walking around like people are not kicking them out, not suppressing them. So that means the whole country's Nazi. But it's, no, dude. Russia invaded and annexed Crimea. And they started a war in the Donbass with Russian military ghost soldiers. Look up Russian military ghost soldiers in the Donbass. And they'll go into detail about it. There's a Vice documentary about it, back when Vice News was badass. And you would expect some neo-Nazis to volunteer for a militia when their country got invaded. It's not sketchy at all. That's expected. But, it looked bad that they had those 20 neo-Nazis in a picture with the Nazi flag. And so it turned into a propaganda piece. And then they were posting this stuff on Twitter, all the stuff about Ukraine. The Russian troll farms were posting all kinds of disinformation running up to the annexation of Crimea and the invasion of Ukraine in 2022. And so this was the stuff that Twitter was censoring in the Twitter files. It was actually, I support them censoring that. I think if they would have just linked people to an article from like the NSA or the CIA explaining, look, the Russians are trying to invade. They're defaming these people similar to how Nazis defamed Jews in World War II. And they're trying to justify the mass murder of innocent civilians by framing them as Nazis. Well, people would have been totally okay with it. People would say, hey, yeah, no, that's legit, bro. Like, I don't want to be involved in anything like that. But instead, they targeted like 75% bots, and then 25% of them were just normal people who were just repeating the disinformation. And then the narrative got out of control. And then the people at Twitter, the leftists, the communists, they were targeting the conservatives. They targeted me personally. I'm still banned from X, even after Musk bought it, because posting something about the Great Replacement, and I got jumped on by a bunch of Antifa, and then got banned. They do a shadow suspension, so you try to appeal the ban, and then they never respond to the appeal. So the only recourse that you have then at that point is a lawsuit. I am, in fact, the head of the Indie News and Commentary versus Twitter and YouTube class action lawsuit. You can hit me up if you want to join the lawsuit. You can find it on GitHub. I do actually have another major revision coming to the lawsuit that when I first wrote that lawsuit, most people would say, you're crazy. This stuff, you're just like watching too much stuff on the news. No, actually, everything that I said was spot on. With Twitter censoring the Hunter Biden laptop, with the COVID stuff, with the the great replacement, like the Democrats using the open borders to replace their population because they do abortions. So they've killed off like 25% of their population. And now they're like rapidly disappearing. So they have mass migration because most of the 2/3 of Democrats live in big cities. 2/3 of Republicans live in small to medium sized cities. So most of the migrants end up in big cities. Like in LA and New York City, there's 36% of the population are foreign born. Third of them are from out of state. In San Francisco, that number is 32%. And so in these cities, the foreign born are the biggest voting population. They're the people who are providing the next generation because the Democrats chopped off their kids' dicks and their boobs. They made them into gay race communists. So now they are too fat, ugly, and gay to have children. So now you got to import in the third world. So now we have people from countries with mentally handicapped IQs importing in infinite retards from the third world to make up for all of the retarded nonsense bullshit DEI abortion crap from the Democrats. Now we have to pay more money for rent because most of these migrants are going to the cities. They aren't going to rural towns that need people to move there because there's no economy anymore. They're going to cities where they can find jobs. And in these cities, there's a housing crisis and there's not enough houses, and supply and demand made the price of the rent skyrocket. And then the Democrats who are in control are like, no, it's not us causing the problem. Your rent's not too high because of the tens of millions of illegal migrants from third world countries that we just flooded the country with. It's not the Democrat landowning class in the big cities, because 2/3 of big cities vote for Democrats. So most of the people who own land are Democrats, right? They're not the reason why rent is too damn high. No, it's the billionaires. Don't hate the millionaire landlord, Democrat. He's a Democrat. He also, too, wants communism. You should hate the billionaires, bro. Because the landlord is just a millionaire. He's just a little guy. He's just trying to become a billionaire. Hate the billionaires. Right? It's a grift. It's a grift. And it's unfortunate that this DEI woke boomer Karen and mentally ill millennial cat ladies have caused this much devastation, because now we have retards like this guy at the Gateway Pundit putting out shit like this, nonstop propaganda from these morons. I've chatted with these guys on Rumble quite a bit, and they're idiots. Like, they think America is not a democracy. We're a republic. Like, okay, so I have actually heard Kraut, the philosopher, make the same thing. So it's obvious that it's not like, you wouldn't have to be stupid to think that, right? But it's so painful. It is so stupid. It is painful. We are a representative democracy. Rome was a republic. We are not a Roman republic, dude. I know you're obsessed with Rome and you think about Rome every day on the regular. But we are, in fact, actually a liberal representative democracy. It's actually 100% true. As many problems as there are with that, and I do accept all of Carl Benjamin's, aka Sargon of Akkad, I accept his arguments of the weakness of the soft underbelly of liberalism. I do understand this, and I do think, in fact, actually liberalism only can work in a heterogeneous society, or a homogeneous society. Heterogeneous, that's the opposite word. Homogeneous society. because it requires akin to Christian morals. It requires a high trust society, and the third world invaders are definitely low trust society, because in those countries people will rob you blind, they'll gun you down, take all your stuff, rape your family. Like, they're psycho killers around those third world countries. It's not, yeah, there's nice people there, right? But look at all that fraud from the Somalians. There's like what, there was like over $9 billion worth of fraud. It was like almost all fraud. Like over half of the money allocated from Medicaid to autism went to fraud from the Somalians, right? But you got to look at it from the standpoint. I mean, as much as I really just like these guys irritate the shit out of me, and the problem with hating on them is it only really makes them stronger, because they're just fueled by just mental retardation, a bunch of like layers upon layers and upon layers of false facts, Ruski Mir, bunch of bullshit, like the U.S. bombed Nord Stream. Dude, the CIA does not do military operations, okay? It's not possible that the CIA could have bombed Nord Stream for Biden. The CIA is part of the executive branch. Do you know what that means? Look it up. Google it. It's put in, is the CIA part of the executive branch? It's going to link you to stuff. Yes, it's part of the executive branch. Yes, the CIA did some coups in the 1940s and 50s. But people, like, they don't put it together like the overthrow the Shah of Iran. They think that stuff happened in like the 80s or whatever. They don't understand that happened right after World War II when there was a communist scare going on. But they reformed the CIA after 9/11. The CIA is part of the executive branch. They don't do military operations. There's no CIA black ops. The CIA does not do anything military. The CIA is an intelligence gathering agency that is part of the executive branch. Because of that, the CIA is answers to the president. Now, of course, Congress does have the in order to change anything with the CIA laws is going to take like a massive undertaking from Congress. So the CIA is pretty much, it is a spy agency, an intelligence gathering agency for the president. It doesn't do black ops. First off, one of the rules of black ops in the CIA playbook that I was told by a CIA agent through a YouTube video is that you never launch a black ops from a factual event, because with the black ops are called kite operations. So you want to let go of the kite and disavow any association to the black ops from the spy agency. This is literally CIA 101. And so it's just not possible. It's almost certain the CIA would never have launched a black ops from what was that, Baltops 22 exercise. That was when one of those NATO exercises that Putin is saying that NATO is encroaching, that they're expanding onto their border, doing these dangerous military exercises. So there's another reason as to why it was probably the Russians. No, didn't they say it was probably the Ukrainians? Yeah, didn't they catch some Ukrainian partisans? I don't know. Couldn't tell you whether or not that was actually true. I'd have to look deeper into it, because with any kind of story like that, I mean, it could be another black ops that they're covering up, and they're blaming this group for the black ops. So I'm going to take that one with a grain of salt. But I'm not going to permanently hate these people, because it is a brain worm. It's a mind virus. They see that they think that Russia is the good guy, that it was the bad guys that were with the Biden people and the WEF that were trying to expand NATO to do a coup to so that they could what are they trying to do? Expand their homosexual agenda into the Christian Orthodox or the Eastern Orthodox areas, and then Putin is like, he's like the based conservative who is sticking up for quote unquote Christian values. But it's like, dude, no, Russia's not like that at all, dude. Russia is fake Christian. People are alcoholics. They have a lot of abortions there. There's a lot of heroin addicts in Russia. People go to mosques in Russia way more than they go to churches. The churches are empty. The people that are there are alcoholics. The mosques are full. But they paint it like it's like Russia's this base Christian country because it works for a certain demographic of people, like these gateway pundit Vatniks. Like Paul Sermon, this moron. Fat pudgy beta male, dude. I mean, look at that, dude. Look at that chin. I mean, look at that. I mean, yeah. This guy is a pathetic loser. 100%. 100. There is no doubt in my mind this guy is a pathetic loser. No women want him. Like, he's done. He's toast. He's over the wall, bro. All they have are their Russian troll farm bots that they talk to, dude. Was there anything else retarded in here? I say a key press conference in the EU summit in Brussels on December 18th, 29th, 18th through 19th, 2025. The Kiev regime leader was discussing Ukraine's potential NATO membership. That will not happen. Right. This is how the propaganda works. So this is the message. So when they say discussing Ukraine NATO membership, the immediate Vatnik response is that'll never happen. Why? Because that's the steps that they took on their side to make sure that will never happen. Really, it could happen. I think that it's going to happen, but they put it in here because it's propaganda, and that is the Russian PSYOP line. These guys are never actually going to get into NATO. You know what? The way I view Ukraine is the NATO military, dude. They are the ones defending us from the Russian invaders. We are the ones being defended. I don't see how. Well, if you think that America is a republic, we're not a democracy, that Russia is a republic, they're not a democracy, we are more like Russia, you might think like that because in their mind, they're so stupid that they think that republic means America. That but they don't understand China is a republic, that Rome was a republic. Not all republics are democracies. Just because you have a Senate does not mean you're a democracy, dude. Duh. This can only be interpreted as hinting. Wait, hold on. That was when he shockingly said the position may change in the future. Politicians change. Some live, some die. This can only be interpreted as hinting at to waiting out Trump's presidency through his potential death in negotiation. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to call it on this one. Fake news, baby. Just in, Volodymyr Zelensky has shockingly hinted he may be waiting for Donald Trump's death. So it goes from unhinged Zelensky, unhinged, you immediately know this guy thinks he's unhinged. That's his side. Hence, he's waiting for Trump to pass away. He hints. And then this goes from there to interpreted. This may be interpreted as And then what did he say? He actually said, the position may change in the future. Politicians change. Some live, some die. So first off, Trump's almost out of office. And whenever he's out of office, he's not going to be the one that's cock blocking Ukraine from being in NATO, dude. All right, so let's just address this whole thing of Zelensky being a cocaine addict. It's not. This was some of the propaganda that was going on Twitter, the Russian propaganda that Twitter was censoring, because they were portraying Zelensky. Like, they would show pictures of Zelensky with a Jewish nose, like the crooked nose, like the way that they would portray Jews in World War II anti-Semitic propaganda. And they would portray him as a cocaine addict, a drug addict. Why? Because they're saying he's friends with Hunter Biden. It all comes back to this Burisma shit. So Burisma, people are saying the corrupt energy company Burisma, you know, they say the lie 1,000 times. You just eventually repeating it. You're like, oh, Burisma. Oh, yeah, that company's corrupt. But why were they viewed as corrupt? Right? Have you ever heard anybody even mention why the company was viewed as corrupt? I didn't think so. Burisma was corrupt because the owner, or considered corrupt, because the owner worked for the corrupt Russian stooge Yanukovych, the president who got overthrown because he was stealing billions of dollars, and he had one of the most lavish mansions in the history of the world. It's indisputable the guy was a thief. You can look up Yanukovych's mansion. I mean, that guy was a thief. He was a Russian stooge. He was the one that was the corrupt one. But the head of Burisma was the Minister of Natural Resources under Yanukovych. And he took some inside contracts. So he was under investigation. And then that was the quote-unquote corrupt prosecutor in Ukraine that was investigating Hunter Biden. And the job that Hunter Biden got, which he actually was qualified to do the job. Hunter Biden went to Yale Law School. He had a JD. He actually owned a law firm, and the law firm did stuff like that. So when they hired, Hunter Biden had other business opportunities that would have paid more. He actually owned a business that brought in a lot of money, and he was actually worth a lot of money. He went to Yale. How much do you think at their prime a Yale attorney is going to be working or earning? A guy with a JD from Yale. Do you think they're going to be earning $50,000 a year? Do you think it's out of the ordinary for somebody who is 50 years old to be making $300,000 a year? Do you think that's out of the ordinary? Let's say they have a JD from Yale. What kind of wages do you think this person would get, or what kind of pay would they get? Would they get 200,000, 100,000, 300,000, 500,000? 500,000 seems to be more right. How about 600,000? I personally would be asking for 8. I think personally Hunter Biden's pay wasn't really out of the ordinary because the guy's not making the pay for super long. You got to realize this. It's like, just because the contractor is making $150 an hour does not mean that he is working 40 hours a week. Okay? He might actually be working 10 hours a week, and you multiply that by 150, and then that's only $6,000 per month. And then he's got to do all this stuff on top of that. Deal with the taxes, yada, yada. So it sounds like a lot on paper, but there's all these things. Like Hunter Biden, he's got an attorney. He has to, a secretary. He has to pay his secretary. He has to pay his law firm partners. He has to pay rent on the building that his law firm is in. Right? It's not like 100% of this money that Hunter Biden got was like he was able to pocket. Some of the money he actually had to pay to go fly over to Europe. There was other fees, things that he had to pay. Missed opportunity costs. So not like I'm shilling for Hunter Biden. I mean, I absolutely have never been known to be a fan of Joe Biden. But the whole Burisma thing, it was ridiculous because the owner was just trying to do a PR thing where he was trying to show he's not a Russian asset. So he's like, oh, well, we'll hire your people. So they also hired CIA director Cofer Black, who he also got a similar pay to Hunter Biden. And if hiring Hunter Biden was corrupt, also hiring CIA director Cofer Black, well, that was already also too corrupt. But the thing is it was a PR stunt. They were trying to show we're not allied with Russia. And then Hunter Biden, like they were trying to buy an energy company. Burisma was trying to buy an energy company in America. That's why they hired Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden is the kind of attorney that might deal with a purchase like that. I mean, yeah, I know it sounds crazy that somebody from Yale might actually be involved in multi-million dollar, like $100 million acquisition of an energy company. I mean, call me crazy, but that doesn't seem suspicious in the least bit. But yeah, it turned into a narrative. You know, they were painting Zelensky as if he was a cocaine addict, that they were funneling all this money. And none of that stuff was true. And Ukraine has been pretty diligent about tracking the arms all the way out to the battlefield. And it's not like they can give the world real-time updates like, here's all where our weapons caches are. We have this many missiles coming in, this many weapons. They're over here. Just go take out our weapons stash before it gets here. I mean, of course they wouldn't do that, right? That would be ridiculous. All right, so I've given these Vatniks enough of my breath. We're going to move on. We got one more article. In our next article from Politico, FCC bans foreign-made drones over national security concerns and spying concerns. The ruling will hit Chinese drone maker DJI the hardest. Well, DJI has the largest market share. I don't think that you can necessarily say they're going to hit them the hardest, because there's also other companies that might have come and they might have actually made most of the money in the market, and they would actually be hitting the hardest. Now, DJI definitely is kind of like monopoly status already, definitely a threat. So I'm going to have to call it on this one. Fake news, baby! The FCC did not ban foreign-made drones over national security spying concerns. The FCC is not issuing any more licenses for new products. If the product already has a license, that product can continue to be sold in America. I personally got this news, and then I freaked out, and then I went over to Amazon and then bought retails for $900 Sky Rover X1 drone, which is like DJI Mini 4 Pro made in Malaysia to circumvent the DJI drone ban. And that's one of those drones that is the cause of this ban, is because they're circumventing sanctions. And me personally, I own an aerospace company called A Starship, and I also own another music technology company called Exposio. And I used to, like I was going to launch this MIDI controller back, in the 2010s, before China did that national security law crackdown, and then they took over Hong Kong, which was supposed to be like a one party, two systems. But after the contract ran out, the CCP just did a coup. They didn't respect the wishes of the people there. And then they were stealing people's IP. They had the national security law that said that if you criticize the CCP, even if you're not in China, then they can still throw you in jail in China. So I can never go to China. At the time, we were being forced to manufacture our products in China to be able to compete. And I had looked into the prices of what it would cost to manufacture my product here in the States. I would have had to sell my product for like $2,000, $2,500, something like that. And other companies would have been able to sell it for like $500 to $800. And I could not compete with that. And if I had submitted my design files to China, then they would have stolen my intellectual property. So I did not finish that particular MIDI controller. I'm still going to do it. We got 3D printers now here, and but now I'm going to have to start making drone parts because like the flight controllers are in short supply. Like we need video transmitters. So I've been building a drone for Ukraine, and I already got my parts list picked out, and you know, we got the frequency hopping anti-electronic warfare hardware picked out. I don't got the software. So I mean, I wasn't really trying to like do that. But now that they're banning new licenses for new hardware, I mean, somebody's going to have to get like fill that void. I've been shopping around because, you know, I've been getting into drones, and there's like jack shit. So this for me personally, I mean, this is like a game changer for my startup. This is like, I just went from there's no way I can compete, and all of the work that I did in computer engineering is like getting thrown away, to, oh my God, I can actually sell a product here in the States that I can make in the States, and I can actually make a profit off of it. So I'm trying to convince my friend who's a machinist to start a company that makes drone motors, because that's one of the things that we're missing. You got to think, like, let's say China invaded Taiwan tomorrow. What are the things that we're going to be in short supply of? We're going to be in short supply of those STM32 flight controllers. I don't think we should be reliant on those. People just get them because they see STM32 and they're like, oh, that's the one. But there's a lot of them. Personally, that's where I'm going to be putting my time into, is diversification of the microcontrollers and the flight controllers. Personally, I got my board. Well, that's my Raspberry Pi. I got my... You know, where's my board? Well, I got it somewhere around here. Got the Beagle Y AI dev board. It was like a Raspberry Pi with a computer vision chip. It's only got 2 teraflops on the AI processing. So it's not that much, but that can do some basic obstacle detection algorithms. And so... yeah, I think what we're going to be doing is just basically diversifying the chipsets away from whatever limited ones we got. And then we can't be flashing firmware on these flight controllers outside of America due to national security concerns, because it'd be pretty easy for somebody to switch the chips out on a commercial drone that you're buying. You think you spent $200 on a drone. You ended up getting a $500 chipset that has AI processing and electronic warfare equipment, and your drone, like, it's like a sleeper drone that activates when you're near an airport and then goes and flies into the jet of an airplane and then takes down the airplane. That's definitely a threat to national security that we cannot be having. So we're going to have to do that. I don't particularly want to have to do that because I have like a billion other things I want to do. I already own like 4 other businesses too, and I didn't want to have to make drone parts. But if you really want to stick a whole bunch of money in my pocket, yeah, I'll take it. Yeah, I mean, this is an opportunity of a lifetime for me personally. I mean, I'm sitting here looking at it like, yo, I just went from like, I can't afford to sell my drone to like, I'm the only guy who's selling drones around here now. Yeah. So what's going on? Speaking of all this drone stuff, it is Christmas Eve. Merry Christmas. No, it is actually Christmas. Right. So, Jesus is awesome. I hope that your family is having a good time. Right now it's 7:42 p.m. I was hoping to get this live stream done earlier. I've been on stream for 2 hours and 44 minutes. And I think I'm done with the stream. Thank you very much for tuning in to RSS Commentary, our first show back online in over 3 years, like 3.5 years, because YouTube took us down for false claims of election and the COVID misinformation. And we got undeleted, thanks to U.S. House Rep Jim Jordan. And hopefully we'll be back online next week with another news episode. So as I say every time, farewell, au revoir, sayonara, and Godspeed in your journeys, my friend. Peace be with you.